Hey everybody, it's Bruce and the dog on the floor, and today we're going to be talking about basic LiveView events. Let's get started. Let me catch you up. So we have this LiveView application. It basically prints a couple of messages, and then it has this customizable content with a count. And this count is being updated dynamically by a message in the LiveView server. And here's what that looks like. Here's the module that we actually wound up building last time. And I want you to think of this through the lens of CRC. Construct, reduce, and convert. If that's a pipeline, it's the head of the pipeline, the middle, and the end. If you're thinking in terms of the job of each of those functions, it's prepare to work, do some work, and show your work. So after a little bit of initial ceremony where we define the services that we want Phoenix to use, this actually is calling using on the Phoenix LiveView module like we saw last time. Then we have the CRC, the constructor, which is the mount, which sets up an accumulator, which is a socket, which has an assigns, which is our public area that we can actually manipulate within the socket. And we have a couple of keys, hello, which has world, and count, which has 0. And then the next step is to reduce. So here's our reducer. And in this context, what this means is that we have functions that take a socket and that return a socket. In this case, there's a wrapping which satisfies the content in OTP, but we don't really care about that. Conceptually, what's happening is we're taking a socket and we're returning a modified socket. That's how CRC works. So what happens in this instance is that an event comes in through OTP called tick. It takes the socket, it modifies the socket with this reducer, which takes a socket and returns a socket, which is the return value of assign. And then we get a socket with a count that's one bigger. So this is construct, reduce, and the last step is render. And all render does is it takes the data. In this case, it's the data that we assign to the socket, the user data for a LiveView, and we actually put this in HTML form. We have a couple of different types of interpolation. In this case, we're just interpolating a string. Here's another string. And in this case, we are dropping in a field or the value for a field of Phoenix click, which we want to be increment. And so we have CRC, and that leads to a working application. So what I'd like to do is I want to delete this timer that's ticking. And rather than have this automatic count, I want to actually use the button to count for us. So I'm going to save this. And so now we have this counter, which is no longer counting until I hit the increment button. Oh, and there's an error. Let's see if we can shoot that down. And so we see the handle event is undefined or private, and that's because we're trying to handle this event with handle info. Remember, handle info is the way we handle inbound process messages, and handle event is the way that we handle messages that come in via socket assigns. So we're getting an increment message in quotes. Let's remember that. We're getting some metadata, which is a value that we have not assigned yet, and then we're getting a socket. So this is handle event 3. And so let's go ahead. We can tweak our application. So this handle info we'll leave intact in case we want to leave in some type of a message that's a timer. We can build an additional one called handle event, and we can use the same type of socket. And this is going to have, rather than tick, the event is going to be the one that we defined up here, right? So the Phoenix click is for increment. So that's what we're going to use here. And then we're going to get some metadata. And then we're going to get the socket. Then we can update the socket. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to save this, going to increment, 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 and this is working correctly. So what I would like to do is help you in your intuition for how LiveView is working. We're going to talk about a couple of different mental models. One is a LiveView loop. So from the standpoint of this is like an OTP application. So if you can understand what's happening under the hood, that will help you understand LiveView. The next mental model is we'd like to think of LiveView from the standpoint of the life cycle. So LiveView is a program that somebody else has written for us, but that program is calling into our code. So we're going to talk a little bit about the life cycle and how that works. And then we're going to talk about LiveView a little bit more through the lens of CRC. If you can look at it as one giant reduction where all we're doing is pulling messages off an inbox in a process, then you can get a great understanding of exactly what LiveView is doing. So those three standpoints are going to come in handy when you're trying to understand the concepts under the hood. And at Groxio, we're all about understanding the base abstractions. And that's an excellent thing. From Bruce and the dog on the floor, this is Groxio Learning.